So thanks everyone for joining today. My name's Kara Folkerts. I'm a senior guide with Aspire Adventure Running. Super excited to continue having these conversations, interviewing badass women on the trails. This is all with a connection with our Women's Adventure Scholarship that we released, and it's still available for one more week. So we closed the scholarship applications on the 21st of March. And this is an opportunity for women to go on 3 of our trips this summer. So we have our Sawtooth Women's Trip, any of our stage races, and our rendezvous trips. So we're really excited to just be highlighting women on the trails, have their experiences, just amplify this all month long and continuing forward. We are really excited today to be talking to Kaytlyn Gerbin. I know you personally from when we met in Costa Rica last year at the Coastal Challenge. You smashed that race, winning the 6-day grueling stage race. You are a sponsored North Face athlete. You have done some incredible feats. You're definitely, I'd say, one of the strongest women trail runners out there right now. And yeah, you are incredibly inspiring. You've done the Rainier Infinity Loop, and I believe it was the first all women's team to do it, you and Alex, which is summiting Mount Rainier and the Wonderland Trail. This past season, you did the FKT, the women supported FKT, with, I think it was 18 hours and 41 minutes. I'm sure you can speak to that too, but this is a trip that we as Aspire do in 3 days, and that's pretty extreme for some people, and you crushed it in less than a day. So yeah, really excited to be talking to you today. So welcome.
Thanks, Kara. It's good to see you.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you'd like to add kind of anything about yourself too, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah. Well, so first I'm sitting on the floor in what used to be my bedroom. I'm in the middle of a move. And so, yeah, I'm kind of shuffling things around. I've got my phone on a stepping stool right now. So just, yeah, I guess it's training for life when you're balancing all these different things going on. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to you guys. Like I said, or like Kara just said, we met in Costa Rica, and that was really fun. And that was actually a great chance and opportunity to just like meet a lot of other people, like stage races. And I know like some of the Aspire trips are kind of built in this way where it's really about building community and having that kind of home base where everyone comes back to and just hangs out, gets people talking off of the trails too, which I think is really fun and unique. So yeah, as a little more background to myself. So I am based in Issaquah, Washington. So not too far from Mount Rainier, where a lot of the Aspire trips are held. And I work as a scientist. I'm a bioengineer at a nonprofit research institute in Seattle. And I also run for the North Face, as you mentioned. So I'm kind of been always balancing the best as I can, life, work, running, and now running as part of my job. So it's been really fun and kind of a new change over this last year.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, we're excited to have you. And yeah, so for our scholarship, we asked the women 3 questions. So I'm going to ask you those same ones today. So to start, why do you love to run, and kind of what role does it play in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the role running has played has kind of evolved for me. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. So, when I first started running and really running in the mountains, I just loved the sense of adventure that brought, and kind of opening up an entire world that now I can just access with my own 2 feet, and kind of just challenging expectations of like what I thought was possible to do in a certain amount of time. And that's not necessarily racing, but just picking a long backpacking route and saying, okay, maybe we could do this in a weekend instead of over a week. And so I think that sense of adventure is really what brought me to trail running and kept me coming back for more. And then, I still really value that. I love getting out and getting out on adventures, but it's turned from this thing that I would just kind of do in my free time to now something that's like really at the front of my career as an athlete. And I think that's something I definitely was not expecting when I first started running or trail running or anything. So it's been really, kind of surreal to see where that path has taken me now, where it's like something that I'm actually like really, pushing forward for myself as an athlete. So it's been fun.
Awesome. So yeah, how did you get into running? When did that start in your life, and when did you start to really see it as so much more of just like going out for a run, but really this huge passion in your life and wanting to, yeah, create it to be something even more in your life?
Yeah. So I was always active as a kid and played team sports and was really into snowboarding. That was like mostly my sport, which is funny because I grew up in the Midwest where there's
Oh yeah.
not mountains. And so it's like little ski hills that we love it. And so you make the best of it.
Yeah.
And so I started running casually when I was in college. And there's a story I've told a few different times, but the short version of it is that there was a 2 credit PE class at the University of Wisconsin where I was studying in undergrad, and it was an intro to distance and marathon running. And so I took that course off of a recommendation from a friend and didn't realize that like running a marathon was actually part of the course curriculum. Like you had to complete a marathon to run the course, which to me was crazy. Like when I signed up for that and I saw marathon in the title, but I kind of just ignored that. Like to me, intro to distance running, like
Yeah.
distance is all relative. Like I mean, I think like it doesn't matter. Like if you're running 1 mile, then distance is 3 miles. If you're running a 5K, then distance might be, oh, I'm going to try to go run 10 miles or something, right? So it all
Exactly.
scales. So at the time I thought, okay, maybe I could run a half marathon. That would be a really good goal. Lo and behold, actually I was going to be preparing for a marathon. So it took me actually a few years to run that first marathon, but by the time I graduated college and I was getting ready to move out to the Pacific Northwest for grad school, I had run my first marathon and was really enjoying that. But again, like even though I wasn't adventuring or exploring in the mountains because I didn't live in the mountains at that point, I was just using it as a way to like explore my new surroundings. And I was doing that a lot on the college campus. But then when I moved to Seattle, I was in graduate school, really pressed for time. And so my daily commute basically became running back and forth between my lab. I would run to the university, although not as often because it's always like trying to run commute when it's not really like in a place that's set up for run commuting. So I would like change in the bathroom before classes, but always just felt really awkward like running somewhere. But running to back and forth to lab was kind of like my normal thing. So I was still running around the city and like bike paths and commuting and stuff. And then it was when I was in grad school that I discovered trail running. So I was in Seattle. There's so many cool trails and even like urban parks too. So I started running a little bit more there, but it really was starting to explore the mountains in other ways. Because like I said, I grew up in the Midwest where I was always outside kind of running around in the woods and stuff. But having access to mountains and bigger terrain here meant that I started taking those like, family camping trips that I did in the North Woods back in the Midwest and going backpacking. Like one of my first backpacking trips out here was in Mount Rainier National Park. And, we did like an overnight and doing some hikes, and I started rock climbing. I started mountaineering. I started backcountry skiing and flipboarding. And so I was always kind of running on the side of that. And then, I'd go do whatever hike or something and then come back home and run. And then it took like a few years really before I was suddenly like, wait a minute, like I should just be running like on the trails or running at
Yeah.
the places where I'm climbing. So eventually started trail running, and I just kind of like took off from there as something that like just clicked and was really fun. Like I wouldn't say I started it and was immediately like, oh, this is my thing, I'm so good at this. But it was this kind of like freeing sense of adventure that just came with like moving freely on the trails, that I just really fell in love with trail running pretty quickly.
Oh, that's awesome. One thing I want to ask you too, if you, during kind of this transition and just falling into all these outdoor sports, did you feel like you had good mentorship or support along the way?
Uh, I love the topic of mentorship because I think it is really hard to find mentorship in all areas of life.
Yeah.
But especially I think as a female in the mountains and in the outdoors. So I I had like plenty of good friends to learn from over time, but really like when I started doing stuff in the mountains, I was really like kind of learning as I went. And I would meet friends or partners. So my husband, Ellie, who my boyfriend at the time, we kind of got into some of this stuff together. So we would kind of learn together, but it's hard to push forward when you have two new people who are kind of just exploring like how things work and how to do things. So we had a friend that had climbed Mount Rainier and Mount Hood and Adams and some of these other volcanoes out here previously. And he took us on our first climb up Mount Hood. And that I think was like a pretty transformative trip for me because it just showed me like, whoa, like the terrain out here is amazing. I've never like thought that I could do something like this before. So that kind of opened the door to, you know, getting excited about getting more education. And then I got involved with this organization called the Mountaineers. So they're in Seattle. It's a nonprofit group that basically runs a bunch of courses for people to learn different skills. There's a ton of different topics, and it's all volunteer led. And so kind of how it works is you take one of the courses and then students are invited to come back as like assistants to volunteer in, you know, subsequent years. And so I ended up taking my ARI, so avalanche rescue education course. So for like backcountry skiing, I took that course through the Mountaineers, and then I came back and I've been coming back basically over the last 10 years to help teach for that. And then I also took a course on glacier travel and crevasse rescue, and then again came back in years after to help teach. So I think like most of the mentorship that I got was through seeking out opportunities to do courses like that, which is a really good way to learn. But I recognize like, you know, it was really nice to be able to have access to that in Seattle area. And it's not as expensive as a lot of other, I think, ways of going about getting educated like that. You know, I was a grad student, so money was tight. And then, you know, all the learning that you get is coming back as a volunteer. I think I learned more in those years volunteering than I ever did, even just taking the class. So that's always really valuable, but it's a time commitment. And so it's hard to get that. And beyond that, I mean, I really like, it's taken many years to have other females to get out as partners with. And so for sure the first 5 years I was doing things in the mountains, I was usually the only woman on my team. And so yeah, I'm like, get really excited about opportunities to get out with more women. And I get really stoked when I see other women out in the alpine and out far on trails, because it's starting to become a more frequent sight. But even, you know, when I was getting started not that long ago, it was pretty rare to see a lot of other women. So yeah, I think that's definitely a space where the more that we can do to kind of help increase those mentorship opportunities and like give back to others, like, you know, basically pay the favor forward to other women, I think can start to help make a difference for getting more women out there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one of our biggest things with not only the adventure scholarship for women, but even these conversations is just having other women see and be empowered and feel supported by women like yourself who are getting after it and being like, oh, like we actually can go into these backcountry settings and feel strong and know what we're doing. And yeah, so it's really, really great to have this as kind of a mentorship for other women. So that being said too, I wanted to ask if you have any particular challenges, barriers, or just difficulties that you've personally found being a woman in the backcountry, and just like different experiences you've had through that.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just like the amount of obnoxious things people have said to me while I'm out, whether, you know, especially when I'm like by myself or with another female. But even so, like, I think, you know, you have to develop a little bit of thick skin and like find a way to laugh about these things. I think one of my favorite topics when I'm out with other girls in the mountains is like to recap all these stories about silly things that people have said or comments that someone's made, basically just like along the lines of like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or what are you doing out here? Or like, I hope you have this, or I hope you have this, or do you know what this is? Do you know how to use this piece of gear? And it's like, the most obnoxious things in the setting that end up being like running jokes. And I think like having a chance to laugh at those things help, but it's also really unfortunate. And I found it actually like helpful to talk about some of these things because a lot of my male partners are great guys, and they just don't realize that people are saying these kinds of things to me. But there's also little subtle things that are done sometimes, like in just group dynamics, that I think having conversations with male and female partners in the mountains about the little like mental shortcuts that we make, or the things that we say. Like I've noticed a difference sometimes in like my decision making when I'm with another woman versus when I'm with a guy in the mountains. And I think has nothing to do, or maybe it does have something to do a little bit with like, that dynamic, but part of it is just like me recognizing, hey, like I think I like fall into a little bit more of a leadership role when I'm just with other women. And even though on the same exact route in the same exact conditions, if I'm with a guy, I know exactly, like I could be leading that and I know that, but the default is to kind of like take a step back. And so I'm trying to just like get to know my own head a little bit more about like what shortcuts am I making, and am I as active in a sorry, am I an active participant to the same extent in both of those settings when like my knowledge base hasn't changed at all. And so I think like, yeah, there's so much to learn there, and there's a lot of interesting dynamics and stuff, but I think again, like challenging yourself and trying to get out with other women is a really good way that I found has helped me to at least recognize like what things I'm doing differently when I'm with guys.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Just the awareness piece behind that and kind of these unconscious behaviors that we have
Mm-hmm.
so often. One thing too that just comes to mind when you say all that is I know we had some conversations around this when you were running the Coastal Challenge, and I even just watched the Ginger Runners video of you guys with the FKT on the Wonderland, and such an
Mm-hmm.
inspiring video. If you guys haven't watched it yet, you guys have to. It's the Ginger Runner video of all the FKTs with you and Dylan this past summer. But I think it's so cool because like you are such a strong female athlete, but you are such a strong athlete to begin with, and like you hold the fourth fastest FKT between men and women, and I think it's so cool because you're really blurring the line between what's possible for women, because I think so often we belittle our own experiences and our own accomplishments, being like, oh, like that's really good for a woman, or
Yeah.
yeah, you did really good for a woman, and like, yeah, you're not as fast as the guys, or like, yeah, that's really good again for women. But it's, I think
Yeah.
you showing that it's like, no, 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 like that's incredible, that's an amazing fast a big accomplishment regardless of it being male or female. So it's really cool to see you stepping into that space and empowering women to continue like rising up in that space as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, there's certainly like a lot of other like kick-ass women out there
oh,
who are
totally, yeah.
doing the same things. And I just, it's an interesting balance though, because I think while it's really important to make sure that like we're not always adding that qualifier of like, oh, it's a good time for a woman, I also think like there's sometimes when we're thinking about results in the overall context, that has the potential to belittle other women's accomplishments who maybe aren't at the, pushing that like top overall time. I'm thinking specifically of like some races where maybe the women's finishing times in a shorter distance are like typically a little bit lower than the men's, and making sure that we still create the space to like celebrate and honor that to the same extent. And like, it's like the classic thing of like when the men's podium comes through, the finish line is empty because no one has come through yet. So it's very clear who like the first, few people through are. If there's a few more men that finish before the first woman comes through, and then the second woman, and the third woman, is that third place woman still getting the same recognition crossing the finish line that the third place guy got? And I think like because of that, like it's like I think that, yeah, I don't really have an answer to it. It's just something I thought about. I think there is a balance there between celebrating the overall times while also still making sure we're celebrating the women's accomplishments just within the category of what women are doing, because I think that's really awesome too.
100%, 100%. And I think similar along the lines what you said about your university course and distant running and how it's all relative as well. And I think it's awesome to be celebrating like your accomplishments and just women who are really pushing that envelope. But even the lady who's doing her first 5K trail run and things like that too. And like that is also incredible, you know? So it's being able, like you said, to find that balance and celebrate both. So yeah. That's awesome. So I know you kind of touched on this previously too, but I just want to ask again, kind of how you've been able to integrate working as a scientist. It sounds like, yeah, you're busy with some projects at home and everything. And also now running as an athlete with the North Face. And it's not like you're training for the odd 50K. You're doing multiple 100-milers a year. I know that's obviously changed a little bit with COVID, but obviously with FKTs and stuff, like you have a pretty busy running schedule. So how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, I think first of all, knowing that like we're all human, and even like I think from the outside it could look like I've got everything all together all the time. Like the reality is like I have times when I'm really hyper focused on certain aspects of my life, and yes, a lot of times that is running. There's also, I think it's important to allow yourself some flexibility to like turn the dials either way. So I'm not at my peak fitness all year round. I take an off season. I take a season to kind of build back up. I take time away from training. I also take time off of running like after big events too. So like, for example, after the Wonderland Trail, I took probably almost a month basically off of running. I did like a few hikes and I was biking a little bit. And part of that was like, I just didn't really feel like running. I wasn't really that excited about it. I just accomplished something really hard and was really proud of that and wanted to just like glorify that and like let my body recover. And it also like was a really good time for me to like put a lot of focus into my work projects, because there's also always these kind of like balances where like just like in your training, you'll have like recovery weeks or down weeks or taper weeks. And I usually see those as opportunities to like put a little bit of extra effort into other areas of my life. So it all kind of pieces together as a puzzle. And there's some weeks like this past week where like my schedule is just like totally haywire and I end up like, not getting as much sleep, not eating as well, and not really training that much. And like, that's okay. Like, I know like in the moment, it can seem like it's like, gonna ruin your ability to race or ruin your ability to, piece together your long run or your workout or whatever. But I think I try to look at things as like what's the whole big picture. And, I think a lot of times as trail and ultra runners, we have the tendency to do too much. And I think like I've always tried to remind myself, especially when I was in grad school, which was a lot at the start of my running, like when I was, when I did my first 100, when I was doing like when I did Squamish 50/50, when I was training for my first Western States and that golden ticket, like that all happened in grad school when I really was like barely had a lot of time to train. So I just kind of remind myself, like, you can only do the best you can with the time you have. Some people have unlimited time and then they train too much. And like some people have very focused windows when they need to be diligent about the running they're doing. But like, recognizing that all of those other things that go on in your life, whether it's work or kids or moving or other responsibilities, like it all adds training stress. And so some weeks, like, my training stress might be much lower than another week, but my life stress or work stress was a lot higher. And so like it all has to kind of piece together. And so just allowing yourself kind of grace and flexibility, I think can at least has really helped me to keep things in some sort of a balance.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said too, it's not only the stress of running, but yeah, all the life, like work stress and everything else going on in your life and being cognizant of piecing it all together. I want to ask you too, I mean, I know last year was definitely with COVID and everything, it seemed like the year of FKTs for a lot of people in local running. And how did that obviously change your 2021 or 2020, sorry, season?
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of races lined up, or what did your season look like?
Well, so last year, so I joined the North Face last year at the beginning of the year. And I also was like preparing to make a little bit of a switch in my science career so that I would have some more flexibility just to to be able to travel and race, and kind of give myself a little bit more room to do that. But then obviously like everything all changed, and I ended up, now I'm working remotely. And so that whole world has kind of changed my science work a little bit. But when I met you in Costa Rica, that was, my first race of what was going to be a really busy year. So I had the Coastal Challenge in January. Oh, I might.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. There we go. Back at it.
Okay, do I need to restart, or am I okay?
I heard the Coastal Challenge. You're good.
Oh, okay, great. So yeah, I met you at the Coastal Challenge. That was either end of January or February.
Yeah, February. Yeah.
And then I went to the Canary Islands to race Trans Gran Canaria, which I won. And I was like, basically with the Coastal Challenge and TGC and both of those going really well, I was just so pumped for the racing year. I was planning to do, I had a pretty full schedule of different, a bunch of races, but also some other adventures and other kind of mountain goals that I had set for myself. And then everything got put on pause. And I guess I kind of saw the writing on the wall in March and just was preparing mentally for like, I'm probably not going to be racing or traveling for the rest of the year. So what other things could I do here that I think would be fun? So I'm definitely like really fortunate to have gotten some early season races in last year, because I know there's, I raced a lot really early in the year, which was a little bit of a gamble. And so, I am ultimately glad that I did that, but there was no way to know that that's how it would shake out. So this year now I'm things seem to be improving, but I also am just like patiently waiting to get a vaccine. So whenever I'm able to do that, I hope that things will kind of start to change that trajectory a bit. But my big plan is to race UTMB this year, and kind of what happens between now and then is still a little bit up in the air. But I'm hoping to get back into doing some races, but also keep that love of adventure. Maybe some FKTs, but also like I don't always like doing things for time. I just like going out and having a good day in the mountains too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to do a lot of that stuff this year and just play it by ear. And another thing I want to ask you too, I find can be a difficult question, because it's always a different thing for a different reason. But do you have one certain running accomplishment that's like your proudest moment, or something that really sticks out as a really special event, or just like backcountry experience for you?
I mean, there are so many. So one of the first things that comes to mind is the Rainier Infinity Loop, which I did with my friend Alex. And that was just like by far the craziest thing I have ever done, ever.
Do you want to explain for the people? Sorry, do you want to explain for the people who are watching? They're like, "What's the Infinity Loop?"
Mount Rainier is the tallest point in Washington. It's just over 14,000 feet. And to get to the top of it, you end up crossing over a lot of different glaciers. So it's considered a technical climb. A lot of people do it in guided trips over like 2 to 4 days. And you have ice axe, crampons, rope, harness, plus all of the glacier gear. Sometimes you're weaving in and out around the crevasses, or these the big cracks in the glacier, and sometimes they put ladders up across it. So it's a pretty big endeavor to just climb Rainier. And so both Alex and I had done it a number of times, so that aspect of it was actually like pretty solid for us. But the Rainier Infinity Loop is this crazy route that goes up Mount Rainier. So you climb up to the summit, and then you drop down a different route. So you go down the other side of the mountain, and then you get onto the Wonderland Trail. So the Wonderland Trail is what the 93-mile route that I ran and set the FKT on in the summer. The Wonderland Trail goes all the way around the mountain. So you go up to the top, down, then you run the Wonderland Trail back to where you started. But then you go again, you go up to the top again, you drop down the other side, but then you go the other way, so counterclockwise. So you basically end up making this infinity symbol, or like, it's like,
Yeah.
That's really I'm not very good at Zoom video, I guess, but yeah, right. You make your infinity symbol around Mount Rainier. So it ends up being something like 140 something miles and 40,000 feet of climbing. Like, I don't remember the exact stats, but it's a hefty route. And there's also a lot of logistics. Yeah, there's a lot of logistics involved too, because you have your running gear for running self-supported for 100 miles, but then you also have all of your climbing and mountaineering gear, which is a totally different ballpark than what you use for the running. So for me, it wasn't even like the time or the necessarily even like the athletic accomplishment of doing that, but the whole experience, like leading up to that trip, like Alex and I managed every aspect of the logistics and the permits and all that stuff, like entirely on our own. Like, I remember her husband, I think, was out on a business trip that week, and my husband was extremely busy and basically unavailable. And so I think, like, in thinking about like what we talked about before, these kind of like mental shortcuts where you just kind of like, without realizing it, you kind of rely on someone else to just like double check you, or you say, like, maybe even if I know, I'll still be like, okay, yeah, here, I've got this many calories. And I'll say, hey, Ellie, does that seem right to you? Right. You just have someone to check that. And with both of our dudes gone and unavailable, it meant that like we fully took on all of the challenges, as two women by ourselves. And I think like that was honestly, like, it's almost sad, but it's like one of the first times I've ever really done that. And I think that in itself was just a really, really powerful experience. And then going out there and doing that. And, we had climbed a few things together before, but again, it had usually always been like also with our husbands or also with other guys. So it was one of the first times I undertook like a really big adventure with only another female, like basically with no males around, except for on the rest of the route. And so I think like that was just a really, a really, really cool experience that definitely changed the way that I think about myself in the mountains.
That's amazing. Yeah, super inspiring. If people haven't looked up what you guys did too, definitely check it out. There's a few different interviews as well and blogs and everything, but it really is an incredible accomplishment. And like you said, just having from beginning to end be you and Alex doing all of it is really cool. So awesome. I hope also there's some construction behind me. I hope it's not too loud.
No, I've got like garbage trucks out.
Okay, good.
Too, so it's coming from both sides.
Amazing. So I guess just one last question I have for you before we wrap it up is, why do you think it is so important to have women continue getting out into these wilderness spaces and exploring the backcountry?
Because we're just as capable, and we're actually maybe more capable. Like I think like it's hard to, I think it can be really hard and intimidating to just get out into a space that you maybe don't see a lot of other people that look like you. And I mean, obviously for women, but the same thing goes with diversifying the outdoors too. And so I think it's just so often that I'll see a group of dudes out, and nothing against those dudes who are out, doing some big accomplishment or climbing some big thing. But most of the time my mind goes to the fact that like, I can guarantee they've got a wife or a girlfriend or a partner at home that would like to do something like that too, but maybe just doesn't have the space to feel like I could like take a stepping stone to get there. Right. So I think like for me, it's really important to get more women out in the outdoors, on the trails, in the mountains, in the woods, whatever. Right. Just because the more of us that there are that are doing it, the more we can kind of continue changing that, changing the demographics of who's out there and doing things. So yeah, we need more ladies out there. We'll get lots of lady high fives out on the mountains.
Yes, totally. Awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. So nice to see your face again and just hear from your experiences. Awesome to just see you continue crushing the mountains and doing so many cool adventures. So really appreciate it. And I just want to use this time too to invite all the women who are watching to apply for our scholarship. We have one more week, so it closes on March 21st. We ask you 3 different questions, and then from all of the applicants, we choose 9 finalists, and then you can write essay, and we then have 3 people we choose. And again, that gives you an opportunity to do any of our stage races, or stage trips, sorry, a rendezvous trip, and our women's sawtooth backcountry adventure. So all really cool trips, and all an opportunity to continue having more women on the trail. So yeah, again, thank you so much, Kaytlyn. Really, really nice to chat again. And yeah, hope everyone has a great day. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara.
Yeah, take care.